for coming to our second educational seminar in an ongoing series. We'll talk more about it later. Next year, please hold on your calendar February 6th and April 16 for the third and fourth in this series. No surprise, we have a little better turnout for a topic of funding. This session, I am now going to turn it over to our moderator, Chris Scotty, and hopefully you're not sick of hearing me because I'm going to actually be one of the panelists. So thank you.
Hey, Chris.
Can someone tell us that you can hear us online just so we know we're good? Howdy.
Howdy.
As mentioned, I'm Chris Scotty. I am director with Texas A&M Innovation. Pete's actually my boss. I'm going to be your moderator today. Ashley, are we good? Can everybody hear us online? All right. So welcome to Commercialization Funding Mechanisms. We're going to run this panel style, but we are also going to allow each of our panelists to present a little bit of background so that you know what types of questions, what types of topics we can dive a little more into. I'm not officially a panelist, though if we end up getting any questions about Texas A&M New Ventures Competition, which I chair, I'd be happy to answer those. To kick things off, I do want to mention, you're going to see this QR code up on the screen. This is for those online as well as those in person. It's important that we utilize this tool called Slido to submit and vote on each other's questions so that we make sure we cover the topics that matter to the most here. So for those of you present, take out your phones real quick, take a picture of one of the screens. You can also go to slido.com and enter the code, which is what, Cody? I don't see it on the screen. It'll be on the screen in a little bit if you have trouble with the QR code. Oh, it's 1896864. I want to say a quick thank you to all the staff that put this together. Ashley, raise your hand. Crystal, Cody, are you in the room? If you have trouble with Slido, you can ask any one of these folks and can help you out. The benefit of using Slido to submit questions is really big when we do these hybrid seminars. That allows everybody that's viewing us online to be on equal footing of those that are present. It helps us to know what questions, what topics you want us to dive deeper on, and make sure that this is of the most use to you. Because we want to make the best use of your time, because we appreciate you taking that time out of your busy days to be here. So if you don't see a question up there that you already have in your mind, feel free to submit your own or vote up one of the questions there. I can see on the monitor, and later when we get into the Q&A portion of the presentation, you'll be able to see up on the screens what the top voted questions are. And that's what we use to inform the questions we ask our panelists. We did seed a few up there, so you might see a few from Cody or Anonymous. That's our office, picking a few topics that we thought you might like to hear about. Please do vote those up and add your own. Any questions before we get started?
Vote up means just hit the like.
Hit the thumbs up button. Yep. And to those online, you can submit your questions the same way. We prefer you not do those in the chat, the WebEx chat. We prefer you use Slido. If you do have a problem, you can post up in the chat. All right, let's go ahead and kick things off. I'm going to introduce and tell you a little bit about my friend, Dr. Saurabh Biswas. I've known Saurabh for a long time. Friend, before he finished his PhD and was even boss for a little while. He's the executive director for technology transition at the Texas A&M Engineering Experiment Station, where he leads the creation of startups and joint ventures. He leads all aspects of venture formation and equity investments, including working with management of the startup companies and business plan execution and fundraising, follow-up monitoring, and serves on the board of directors and advisors of portfolio ventures. Saurabh, thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Howdy.
Howdy.
Nice to see a lot of known faces. Welcome to the panel conversation today. So as you saw, the panelists in the group today, we will go through 3 different stages of how an innovation goes from early stages of R&D all the way to a point where you are raising private capital. And our goal will be at the end of this panel, you will be at least having a pretty clear idea that if you are a researcher today at Texas A&M or working within the university, what are the specific steps you can take to at least improve or maximize the chances of getting your idea to the next level. It is never a straight line, but we also have a lot of resources today where we can help you think through that process. So I will focus on the internal. So I will focus on the internal strategies of R&D. By that, what I mean is when I say internal, that you are still within A&M system, you are running a lab, either you are a grad student or a postdoc, and you are part of the A&M. It's a pre-company that a company hasn't been formed, the license hasn't happened. So what we are going to talk about is what are the resources you need or what resources you have to really navigate through the initial stages of technology development and move towards potentially a venture down the line. So what you're looking up here is challenges of translating deep tech innovation. I'm using the word deep tech more with the definition that NSF uses for technologies like semiconductor, quantum, biotech, space. These are all the areas, as you will see on the screen, on your left side, there are certain challenges which are in common. Long cycle to market, significant capital need, extensive intellectual property portfolio. Most of them have regulatory issues with that. So none of these are incremental technologies that you might typically see in shark tanks, but all of these are technologies which have very long paths to market. And then you don't control the markets. There are challenges of cyclical hype cycles. We are going through all of them, all of these sometime or the other. So the goal is how can we help you through that process and figure out and access resources where you can, in spite of being in this space. We all are scientists, we keep coming up with ideas and we try to take them to a process where they're marketable, investable ideas. So basically what we're looking at here are two things, a technology risk and the market risk. These are the two primary things that you have to address as you're taking your idea from point A to B. Point A being, as a researcher, you're doing your work, and B here, I'm talking a formation of a company to commercialize your ideas. Technology risk. Being in the university, all of us definitely have a much better handle on this aspect of technology development. We tend to over-engineer, but at least we understand the risk of building a device or a drug or a diagnostic. What does it take to take it from point A, which is invention, to a process? We are talking validation of an idea. The other piece here is market risk. And this is something which typically we are not designed to handle because we are focused on invention, innovations, ideas, research, graduating students, and really making an impact through that process. So when it comes to market risk, how do we address that? Because one thing which has been pretty clearly understood, and I will quote a very large study done in 2012, basically to address the curiosity, why startup companies fail. Why there's such a significant number of startup companies don't make it, even after they raise a lot of capital. And everyone kind of thought some logical responses to that, like they run out of money, they don't get to find people, the technology doesn't pan out. But what was very interesting after that process, what came out at the top, and significantly with a big margin, was very interesting. Most companies are bringing products to market that no one wants, which was eye-opening, but today it's not. But that's one of the key things which we are not designed to address. We keep working on technology. We hope that this is solving a problem, which sometimes we feel is the right answer to an existing problem. And in that process, you go through the whole cycle of innovation, you raise capital, you build a team, and the process is you don't make it to the market, either through revenue. There are hundreds of products out there in the market which don't go anywhere, partly because that's a problem. So when you look at this slide, what we are using is a typical TRL metric, which is used quite a bit as a standard framework now to understand what stage your idea is. In life sciences, we have a little bit different language. We can use preclinical, clinical, and all those things, but it kind of gives you an idea. And on the academic side, we are talking here literally TRL 1, 2, and 3. The definition might change, but that's the maximum we typically put within the academic environment before we go out and start looking at private capital or start moving things forward. So what I'm going to talk about are three mechanisms, which is really going to change, at least in the early stages of your technology development, how you can start addressing both technology and market risk. And a lot of you, some of you have gone through some of these mechanisms already, but certainly this is something I'd like that everyone across the A&M system starts taking advantage because we have access to these resources now. The NSF iCorps program, this is something is at this point well known. It's a decade that we have this program in the country. We have been associated with that program for almost 10 years, different mechanisms. In 2023, we were awarded as in Southwest Hub. We are the founding member of the Southwest Hub. It's a 5-year grant. And basically the goal of the hub is to support faculty, graduate students, postdocs, really work through a programmatic process to try to understand their market, try to understand their product, and really apply that as they go out and start working on their technology development. So why do you want to leave your lab and start working on a program which is quite different from what you do day to day? There are a few things which in my experience being associated with the program since 2012 makes a real difference. It really forces you, I'm talking the word forcing here because typically as a grad student, you don't like to even talk to someone in the next lab. This is forcing you to go out and start talking to people who are in the industry. And so it gives you a far better understanding is what is the value proposition, what you're truly bringing to the industry. What are the potential markets you want to go after? What does it take to commercialize? What's the length of time? What's the typical challenge? How much capital do you need? Networking. One of the key things that you all have to think, you are a grad student or a postdoc, including faculty, that you need to know people before you go out and start asking for capital. It is not a grant application. We apply to solicitation. A lot of this world of business and built on relationship. And then certainly learned about a lot of approaches out there to how you go out and raise capital. And in the last, why I put that $50,000 at the end, because it also not only gives you capital, but this is truly a grant to a PI, which they can use for a lot of follow-up funding that NSF provides. So it is not only a $50,000 grant, but it also takes you through a lot of learning process, including your grad students, postdocs, and faculty. So this is just a roadmap. You are a researcher at A&M. You are potentially at invention disclosure stage. We have submitted one. Then we have 2 programs, the lineage launch or idea launch and the national program. Across the hub, we are every month running the idea launch or the lineage launch program. And then once you finish that, it's a quick 3-week program for the grad students and postdoc. You come in with your technology, you can move on to the national program, which is a $50,000 grant. So basically there are 3 key participants here, entrepreneurial lead, it's a PhD student or the postdoc or the graduate student. You have the TL, who is a faculty or somebody who is significantly experienced about the technology in the lab. And then you have industry mentor. For the idea launch program, which we are running every month across the hub, the graduate student or the postdoc or the EL is the primary requirement. But for the national program, you need to have a team of 3. And we certainly talk about these things when we are going through this process. So idea launch, this is something is a quick 3-week program. The primary goal of this program is 30 interviews and learning the business model canvas, which takes you through 9 quadrants of fundamental aspects of how you take your technology through a process of needs refinement, customer discovery, and making some key decisions. Slides will be given to you, so I will not get into details of that. Then the National iCorps program, which requires either you have prior NSF funding or you complete the idea launch, and that takes you to the NSF program, which is a grant to the PI, but it's a 7-week program, takes the students and the whole team to 100 customer discovery interviews. And basically at the end of the program, you're asked to make a decision whether you want to move forward with the innovation or you want to go back to the drawing board and make changes based on this evidence-based process. Why this is such a useful mechanism? Because what I have seen at this point, literally through hundreds of teams, is it changes the way people start thinking. It changes the quality of invention disclosure. It changes the quality of claims, because now you have a far better understanding that what's the differentiation, what's the gap in the industry, and you're not just talking about your own technology, you have a far better global understanding. And that's the value of this program that is unique. This is a 7-week program. Basically, there are multiple cohorts which are open in every semester. So it depends on when you are, where you are in the process, the time commitment, and few of these things are very important. But we certainly help you as a hub to go through that process, do the application, and place you in one of the cohorts in the national iCorps. So to close it out, in terms of point of contact, I am the lead PI. Lene Hubner, her contact is there. So please feel free to reach out. Every innovator across A&M system, if you have done an invention disclosure or plan to do so, you are all eligible to go off the idea launch program, which makes you eligible for the national program. So if you don't have NSF funding, that's absolutely fine. The idea launch takes you through that process and you can go to the national program. So this is one of the programs that addresses that market risk very clearly. I will quickly touch upon two programs, which I am calling a tech maturation funding, because this is a funding which is very directed towards how to advance your technology with specific commercialization metrics and goals. It is very different from research grants. So the Advancing Discovery to Market is managed by the Office of VPR. This program really, it started last year. It's a fantastic opportunity for those of you who are thinking about post-invention disclosure, how we can take our technology forward. It has external reviewers. The eligibility is quite simple. You are a researcher faculty at A&M or the agencies across the A&M system. It's a milestone-focused 24-month funding. Two types of funding are here. One is focused on more immature early-stage ideas. It could be platform technology. You're looking for where to go, where to apply your ideas. The second one, where you have a proof of concept, potentially your idea is a little bit matured, you have an IP portfolio building up, and you want to go out and test, validate your prototype or scale up. There are multiple different things you can do. That's up to $500,000. It's a very focused, milestone-driven funding. So as you're doing the work, you're meeting certain milestones, and that leads to the funding process. The review criteria, though it looks like a lot of NIH funding, but this is very focused on, again, meeting the commercial metrics as you move the process forward. The second tech maturation funding is Translational Investment Fund. This is done by the Office of Innovation. It's $75,000 per project. So certainly this is a significant amount of capital too. And this is again focused on improving the quality of intellectual property, potentially leading towards a direction where either you're licensing this to an existing company or to your startup. So these two programs, the ADM, the Advancing Discovery to Market, and Translational Investment Fund, are key tools that you have as an innovator. If you are doing an NSF iCorps process or going through that, you now have a follow-up step to identify the market, understand where you want to go. You can go after the Tech Maturation Fund, which now provides you a process that as you're advancing in your journey from a concept to market. The third aspect I will touch upon is academic translation funding. This is definitely far more complicated because of the way this funding comes from different agencies. But one of the things I will touch upon, this is an emerging trend that we are seeing across the nation. There is this definitely an understanding that we need to do more to push academic prototypes to the next level. So a lot of these agencies, as you can see on the right, these are some of the specific opportunities that money comes directly to you as a PI, but this funding is very focused on how you can move the metric of commercialization. So a few things you can see on the left side, a lot of it for training the workforce, the future CEOs, the CTOs who could be your grad student postdocs. You need to have a pretty good handle on IP data and R&D management, how the process will work, who will own, do you have a plan to move forward? Industry partnership is heavily encouraged. So certainly in most cases it is required. But the good thing about this level of funding is sometimes significant. You can go up to $500,000 to $1 million depending on which program you're going to be part of. NSF has PFI, which is the most common one where people go after, but you can see on the list, there are multiple programs here. Those are focused on deep tech. They're focused on partnership with industry, and they definitely want an outcome which gives you the trajectory to go to the market. So coming to my last slide here, with the three opportunities that you have on the top, with the NSF iCorps, the two tech maturation funds, and the external funding that comes to your lab, basically these are the few things which I'd like to keep in mind as you are moving forward. Not all of these things are simple. It takes time. It takes a lot of effort to take an idea to market, but keeping in mind your IP, understanding the market, try to start building a team early on so that you can find people who are receptive to your ideas, potential entrepreneurs, understand your minimum viable product. You don't need to build something you don't want at this level. Try to understand that, how much funding you need. And finally, what I'd say that use the evidence-based process to make a decision of commercialization. And I can say that that's really can help you in the process as you move on early stages of invention to a point where my next panelist is going to talk about. So with that, I will pass it on to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Saurabh. So as you can tell, that's a lot of information really quickly. If you want Saurabh or any of the panelists to dive any deeper into any one of those topics, please do put a question in Slido. I do see some folks on there that are voting questions up. So thank you for your interaction there. Next up, I'm going to introduce my boss and the Chief Innovation Officer for Texas A&M Innovation. Pete leads the team that manages the intellectual property for the 11 universities and 8 state agencies that comprise the A&M system. He has previous experience in healthcare commercialization as the Executive Director of Cleveland Clinic Innovations and Aerospace Commercialization as the Deputy Director of Great Lakes Industrial Technology Center at NASA Glenn. He's also spun out a company from Cleveland Clinic and started another on his own, commercializing technology from another university. And I just want to give a special accolade for that, because in my 20 years working in this ecosystem, it's the first time we've had someone in the leadership of commercialization at the level he is at that has actually run a startup, successfully exited the startup, and raised funds from some of the sources we're hearing about today. Pete.
Thanks, Chris. All right, so Saurabh talked about funding inside Texas A&M. I'm going to talk about non-dilutive funding in a company. And I'm going to focus on SBIR, STTR. I'm really going to focus only on SBIR. So I know there's other sources of funding that could be non-dilutive, but I think SBIR is a really valuable program. So these are what those acronyms mean. They're both awards into companies. And so as much as there may be derived from university technology, these are awards into a for-profit company. There are some differences though. And I'm going to go through this quickly because this is all stuff you can find if you Google and look on the internet. But some of the key differences, for an SBIR, the PI has to be primarily employed in the company. That is not true for an STTR. You can see there the amount that can be subcontracted. So the remainder is what can stay in, is required to stay in a company. So for example, in a phase 1 SBIR, 2/3 of the grant need to stay in the company. And they can subcontract up to 33%, versus on an STTR, you can see you can subcontract more than half the money. And similarly, I also want to point out the amount of money available from these agencies is much more on the SBIR side, which is another reason why I'm going to focus on SBIR. So SBIR, there's a few different ways to apply. There's phase 1, as that implies, that's the earliest. That is what's sort of generally thought of as the proof of concept, 6 to 12 months. Then you would normally think about followed by a phase 2, 2 years. That's intended to be a commercialization grant. There is what they call a fast track, where you can simultaneously apply for a phase 1 and phase 2. I personally think that's the hardest. I think it's the hardest thing to think about, applying and describing a winning phase 2 project before you've even done phase 1. There is what's also called a direct to phase 2. You might say, well, why this sounds even harder. But the implication here is you've done the phase 1 work in some other way. With some other funding, you've completed that proof of concept work. And so unlike the fast track, where you have to, in one proposal, write about doing the phase 1 and write about doing the phase 2, the direct to phase 2, you can talk about having already completed that phase 1 work. I'll talk about that in a moment. So that's all. Again, there's lots you can find online. I'm here to talk to you about that company Chris mentioned. The name of it is Pedialytics. It is to use machine learning to analyze baby cryoacoustics as a diagnostic. This is technology licensed out of Brown University. And there they had more than 25 years research. Obviously not machine learning for 25 years, but they were analyzing, correlating the acoustics of baby cry to different conditions for more than 25 years. Two, what NIH calls R01 awards, almost $4 million each, one for neonatal opioid withdrawal syndrome, one for autism. Brown University has provided $100,000 proof of concept funding. They had one issued patent, one pending, something like 80 publications. All that's a way of saying there was a lot, it seemed like a lot of background work. And so I was invited to come into the project as the entrepreneur lead. I knew the good friends with the head of innovation at Brown University. So I said, well, this is great. Let's go start talking to some investors. So started with the Brown Angel Network. You would think, oh, this is technology out of Brown University. The Brown Angel Network should be interested. Spoke with the Autism Impact, as the name implied, a fund focused on autism. Spoke with a group based in Cleveland, Ohio. That's where I was at the time, the North Coast. Spoke with another group called the Slater Fund, which is Rhode Island specific. Spoke with another group, Springwood Ventures, a pediatric focused venture fund. My point for bringing all these up is there's as you go out and then talk with investors, many of them have areas of specialty, and I talk with many of them that would have seemed like well aligned with the work that we were doing in Pedialytics. I spoke with many other investors, and for more than a year was speaking with investors and constantly got the feedback, very interested in your work, but every time the answer was, it's too early. Many of these seed fund, our angel funds, wanted to see revenue. If you work in healthcare, revenue is way down the road. There's no such thing as early in revenue in the same sense. So we just started to think about what would be an SBIR strategy. One strategy is to do the phase one. That is, the statistics there are better. I think the kind of grant you could write would be easier. In general, the odds of getting that are better. But it's only $275,000. Say only, I mean, that's certainly better than a stick in the eye, but you can't build a team. It's a limited amount of work. Versus the direct to phase two is, yeah, admittedly, it's a harder grant to win. But $1.8 million of non-dilutive funding is valuable. For us, we approached it that the work we had, so we looked at our entire portfolio of all the different applications. We said, hey, looks like our neonatal opioid withdrawal syndrome existing data could qualify us for having completed the phase one work. So we decided to submit a direct to phase two for that application. So how did we go about doing it? We contacted the program officials months beforehand. I have that bold underline. I'm here sharing some case study with you, and I don't know what the data is. My data that I'm going to reveal here shortly was that this kind of relationship building and understanding what the NIH was looking for, that could have been the most important thing I did in this whole project process. So I don't know that, but it certainly was valuable. Then you got to do all the company preparation stuff. DUNS number, SAM.gov, company address. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's very unexciting, but you have to. We prepared the application. We outlined the project, defined the specific aims. Here's the second thing I bold underline. I've written 10 to 15 commercialization grants, won lots of them. I've reviewed probably 100 plus commercialization grants. My researchers, as I just said, they've won multiple RL1 grants. They've won others. So we both knew how to write grants. I'm convinced that if we had not used an external consultant to help us, there's no way we would have won our award. And so one way or the other, you need to get external expert grant writing support into your project. And if you don't, I think you're really undermining your successes. I'm going to touch on that again in a minute. There's for the NIH anyway, there's a pretty good online guidebook. It's 179 pages, which is a lot, and it's a pain in the ass, but If you're in this business, you need to know what's going on in there. Look at successful other proposals. I've shared my proposal with a couple people in this room. I don't want to turn that into a public document, but I think as we go forward, we'll develop some form of library of successful proposals that people can review. Oh, and then you have to submit through this mind-numbingly painful thing called ERA Commons. And I'm assuming other grant government agencies have something similar. Pain, that was just pain. So we got a borderline score. If you're in the federal, we had a 31. It really is a borderline score, but the fact is we got awarded. And so I am an evidence of that. Yes, a score like a 31 can get awarded. This goes back to, I don't know this, but I really believe that early work that I had done with the program official and developing a relationship there, I think that mattered. I think when it came time to making the last couple awards, they liked us. They understood our work, and it certainly did not hurt. We did hire an accounting group to manage our finances. You're pulling money from the federal government. You're spending it in a way. I mean, you do that wrong, bad things happen. So that needs to get done well and professionally. So a little bit of time went by. It was like, we're good at this. Why don't we do this again? We decided to submit a phase 1 application for another application of machine learning baby cry analysis. And we said, well, phase 1 compared to a phase 2, this is a chip shot. So we did not develop the relationship. We used the same consulting group. I can share that proposal with you as well. It still took a lot of time to do that. Punchline was it did not even get scored. So it wasn't even a matter of, and again, I'm not super expert in this, but you get really good scores and you get borderline scores and then you get bad scores and then you don't get scored. Right? So we were in the not get scored category. We weren't didn't even get a bad score. We were just didn't get scored. We did get a review, and the reviewer's comments really in retrospect seem pretty severe for what was a phase 1. And so my personal takeaway from this is the risk of a phase 2 compared to the reward of doing the phase 2 might be worth it, especially if you know anything about the page limits. I didn't talk about that. You have a lot more room to write about what you've done in a direct to phase 2. So as much as phase 1s are not always easy. So my final slide is to come back to Texas A&M. If you're thinking about writing an SBIR, please work with our office. That is what we are here to do, is to work with inventors, faculty to make our commercialization projects stronger. I'm not saying we're your grant writing experts. In fact, we are in the process of securing grant writing contracted services. We need to develop a process how we're going to do that. We're not going to write an SBIR application for everybody that comes to us. So we're going to have to develop some kind of screening process for that. But we will do that because I've seen that is an important part. And then some of the additional things that we will do is help with company structuring. I talked about how much, the PI, you need a PI that's more than 50%. So how do you find that in the human being to drop into your company? We will help with the accounting, so you don't have to go out and just hope you find somebody good and reputable. We will have somebody good and reputable. And we will do even more than that. That's what I got. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. So next up, we're going to hear from Matt Kebodeaux. Matt, I've known for a while, but he started his career in the oil and gas industry with Baker Hughes. And he spent 22 years with the company. He had the opportunity to travel around the world while gaining experience and roles from sales to operations, marketing, and executive leadership. His most senior role having responsibility for the strategy and new product development of the Completions product line, a $2 billion global business. After leaving Baker Hughes, he worked in executive roles for two different private equity-backed companies, Flex Steel Pipeline Technology and Achilles Information, where he helped those small businesses improve internal performance and build on growth opportunities. Matt has a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from University of Louisiana at Lafayette and an MBA from Texas A&M University. He now resides in Dallas, Texas, and spends his free time as an angel investor and advisor to early stage companies. He's a member of Aggie Angel Network, where he serves on the board of directors. I'll also add that Matt served as a lead for the Aggie Angel Network Investment Prize at TNVC for several years, which I personally really appreciate. Matt?
Thank you, Chris. Howdy.
Howdy.
Before I get into my slides, I'd like to see a show of hands. Who agrees with me that Florida State got shafted? TU does not belong.
No.
So now that we have that established. So you think you're ready to raise money? My first bit of advice is seek legal counsel. There are a ton of landmines out there, okay? The first one I want to talk about is company formation. Founder wants to start a company, he goes and forms an LLC, and he thinks he's ready to go and raise money. Fortunately, an LLC does not work when you're raising private money. LLCs allow for pass-through taxation, which does not work for investors. Okay, so if you're going to raise money from whomever, venture cap, angels, private money, you need to be a C corp. Reason being, it allows for multiple variations of shares, as well as variations in stock price, which you're going to need. So if you get set up as, if you're getting ready to set up as a C corp, because that'll give you the pathway you need to get into raise money. Secondly, you need to understand investment vehicle options. That's where an attorney can help you with that. You're going to raise money either through a safe convertible note or some sort of share, issued shares. Founders typically like the idea of a safe because it's simple. Unfortunately, investors don't like the idea of a safe because it's too simple. Okay, it doesn't provide for any protections for the investors. The real standard for a vehicle for investors is convertible note. So it's worth you, if you're going to go that direction, to take the time. It requires a little bit more work up front, but again, that's where your legal counsel can help you with that. But it's worth going ahead and getting a convertible note for your vehicle, because there's not an investor out there that will not accept. The third point I have here is understanding restrictions on accepting money. This is huge. Securities Act of 1933 basically required any company that is selling securities or making an offering for securities to be registered with the SEC. Now, you're a startup. You're not going to go and register with the SEC, right? So if you're going to take money from an investor, you have to do it through one of the exceptions that exist. Rule 506 allows for you to take an unlimited amount of money from an unlimited number of accredited investors. And that's the key there. It's accredited. Now, Rule 506 also allows you to take a limited amount of money from a limited number of non-accredited investors. Now, I'm not an attorney, and I'm not going to try to give or pretend to be giving legal advice. So take note, this is not legal advice, okay? The only advice it is get you a lawyer, talk to a lawyer, and understand what you're doing before you start raising that money. Because that's a huge trap that you can get into. We'll talk a little bit more about accredited investors later on. Now, when you're seeking legal advice, look, you can find all of this online, right? You can Google it. Problem is, do you trust what you read? And do you really understand it, right? You are hopefully setting the pathway for a long relationship with a good lawyer. So at least in my opinion, it's worth looking out there, to see if you can find a good lawyer that works regularly with startups. Because again, hopefully that will be a long-term relationship. The other side of that is if you go out to raise money and you don't clearly understand what you're doing from a legal standpoint, the investors will pick up on that. That will not go very far. Okay. So this may seem counterintuitive. First step in seeking external dilutive funding is figuring out how you want to exit. Many founders think they want to build and scale a business and then eventually exit through an IPO or M&A. It's sexy, the thought of cashing out with an IPO or M&A and big numbers, right? Challenge with this is it's also a long and potentially expensive road. Now, if you have a brand new product in a totally new market, that may be the exact way to go. But I just want to throw out there are other options. That being developing your product, letting someone else shoulder the burden, either through licensing and franchising. Okay. And again, back to that good attorney, they can help you write licensing agreements that limit the use of that technology so that it offers you an opportunity to sell into multiple markets, licenses into multiple markets, or multiple licenses over multiple years, right? Which leads to more money for you. So, I'll throw this to you. What are the sources of dilutive funding? Where would you start? Anybody? Family and friends. Family and friends. Oh, there's actually 3 F's there. You had the third one. Yep. Where else? Okay. Any other thoughts? What's that?
We repeat them so people online.
I'll start with you. Okay, and that is the first place to start. And the reason that's the first place to start is because if you won't invest in your own company, why should I? Right? What message are you sending to an investor if you don't put your own money into it? I realize you're going to say, well, I put a lot of time, blood, sweat, and equity, right? It's different than writing your own check, putting your own money. Yes, you may be a college student, may not have a whole lot of cash. It doesn't matter how much it is. It's the fact that you're going to risk your own money in your own company. Second one there is the friends, family, and fools. And the third F is there because typically friends and family aren't accredited investors. We have to question, are they a fool? Okay. Again, back to what we said on the previous slide, you can take money from a limited number of individuals in a limited amount. So again, make sure you understand what those restrictions are and how much, exactly how many and how much you can accept from. But again, when it goes back to your cap table, investors like to see that your family, your friends, regardless of how much it is, because you may not have a rich uncle, they want to see that those people actually believe in your idea enough to invest. Of course, angel investors, the Aggie Angel Network, we're fortunate enough to have one right here in our own backyard. We partner with McFerrin. And then we get into venture cap and private equity. However, oh, it didn't pop up. There's supposed to be a line for private equity. They pop up. Yep, there it is. So private equity really isn't a source of funding for the startup. Okay, it's a source of exits, but not a source of funding. VCs definitely are a source, and I hear a lot of founders say, "Yeah, but I don't want to have to deal with a VC." Well, I'm here to tell you they're a necessary evil, and I mean that in the best way. Okay, if you're going to raise $1 million or $2 million, angels can cover. But if you have a long runway, and you're looking at some point to have to raise 4, 5 more millions of dollars, you're going to have get money from VCs. Okay, And so the bit of advice I want to give you on VCs is don't wait until it's time to raise $4 million to start getting out there and meeting those VCs. Okay? VCs will not write you a check the first time you pitch. They want to build a relationship. They want to see who you are. They want to see that you deliver on what you say you're going to deliver. So when you work out your performance, you see, I'm going to need $6 million at some point down the road. Start looking for your VCs early. Okay, they specialize in industry. So based on which industry you are, find those VCs. Start visiting. You have a good product, good idea, you're credible, they will take the time to meet with you. Okay? But they want to meet with you. They want to watch you. They want to meet with you this year, and then next year they will want to meet with you again because they want to see your progress. What they're doing at the end of the day is building a relationship, right? Because it's very important that not only for them to have a relationship with you, but for you to have a relationship with them. Because you want to make sure you're taking money from the right VC. Okay? That they see things in a similar way that you see things. And that is a true fit. Because when you're taking $4 or $5 million from them, believe me, it's going to be a very tight fit. So you have to have a good relationship with them. You have to do. Okay. Other opportunities for dilutive funding, competitions for startup. TNVC's up there, McFerrin. Look, again, right in your backyard. McFerrin has several different competitions through the years. Whether or not you participate in one of those competitions, they have a ton of resources. So use them. In terms of competitions, TNVC is probably the best competition for startups that I've ever seen. And I've participated in multiple ones, including the Rice Business Plan competition. TNVC, again, is right here. Even if you don't apply, go to the finals. The last day, you'll see the final round. You'll see the elevator pitches. And you'll get a true understanding of what you're going to have to do when you go raise money. Okay? If you're ready to raise, apply to them. AEM actually gives a prize through TNVC for our top pick for an investment. Crowdfunding, the one thing I'm going to say about crowdfunding is it's become very popular lately. I would caution you on crowdfunding because investors a lot of times see crowdfunding as a way to get money for startups who are not able to get money from the first one. Okay? So if you decide to go and use crowdfunding, don't do it as your first step. You might use it to fill around with your last little bit, but again, it's just like friends and family. Typically, these people are not accredited investors, which means you're limited on what you can take. So, angel networks. Angel networks are basically just groups of SEC accredited investors. And we form networks basically to collaborate, to pool resources, to make bigger investments as a group. If you look at AAN, for example, my background's in oil and gas. There's very few of us, believe it or not, that have oil and gas backgrounds. But there's medical doctors, guys with IP backgrounds. I mean, you go down the list, but it's very rare for a company to come pitch where there's not someone within our network that doesn't have experience in that industry. Okay? And so that's why the angel networks exist. They actually started in the early 1990s. So they're relatively new, but there's over 250 angel networks within the US. There's over 12 angel networks just within Texas. AAN was launched in 2010. We have over 35 members. We do 10 pitch meetings a year, and we see on average about 35 companies come pitch to us. That's out of 100 applicants. So we take about a third of the applicants, they actually get to pitch. And of that third, about a third of those actually get some sort of funding. Good news is, especially within Texas, the angel networks talk. We share deals across networks. So if you come in and pitch to AAN, let's say you're raising $1 million and you get $100,000 from AAN, it's very possible with the other angel networks in Texas that you could fill your round just within Texas. Okay? So you've applied to AAN, been accepted. You're going to go pitch. First test is passing the stiff test, right? You've got to prove that you have a strong management advisory team. You have a real competitive advantage in a large, potentially large market. You have a very good understanding of that market and how you're going to enter the market. Ideally, you have an industry partner who's offered you a field trial. You also have IP and barriers to entry for others. And then you have a potential for return of something that's in excess of 10x, right? So 5x, that doesn't quite cut it. I'm sorry. It needs to be significant just because so many startups fail. Angel investors figure on 50% of their investments will fail. So if we're going to invest in someone, they need to have a potential for a very significant return. You get one chance. It's that pitch, right? So if your CEO is not your best presenter, don't let him present. Better put your best presenter forward. Nothing wrong with having the CEO there to provide support to someone who's a better presenter. Say you're fortunate enough to get attention from the investors. Now the real work starts. The question is, are you ready for the deep dive? Because they're not going to write you a check right there on the spot. They're going to want to go through your cap table. They're going to want to see who has equity in the company and how much. That's where they want to see, did your parents actually invest, right? Where are the friends and family? Did you put money into that company and how much do you own? They're going to want to see your pro forma. So ideally that pro forma contains your existing financials for the current year as well as your previous financials and a projection for the next 3 to 5 years. Now that picture up there, I know you can't see it. The whole point on that is it's very, very detailed. It's too detailed to see on the slide, but that's the amount of detail that you need to have in your pro forma. Okay. Obviously, you need to have an understanding of what it will take to scale, as well as solid exit strategy in 5 to 7 years. These are not 20-year investments, less than 10 years. Okay. You will probably be challenged on your valuation. Bottom line is, again, same thing here as with VCs. They want to make sure there's a personality, right? They want to make sure there's alignment between the founders that work together. Because at the end of the day, you want to see that there's ability, you have the ability to deliver when things get tough. Now, the good news, any of these investors, the angel investors and the VCs, they want to see you succeed. Okay? They are going to be there if you have a question, if you need support, other than just financial. So if you're lucky enough to get funded from it, I would say get to know them. Okay? Get to know the ones that have the experience you need, and don't hesitate to pick up the phone and call them, because they will support you. Your success leads to their success, right? But at the end of the day, you cannot forget that the investors are there for one reason only. Thank you.
Going to jump into the Q&A portion of the panel now. And we did have some technical difficulties, so some of the questions that were up there previously disappeared. I'm going to try to remember as many of those, and we'll get them back up there. But I remember which ones got voted up, I think. So anyway, let's start with one that I talked about with several of you beforehand. Talk to us about team at each of the stages that you have talked about today. What does the team behind the technology or the company need to look like to maximize their chances for success with the funding that you spoke about today. And we could go in order every time from earliest stage to latest, but then it'd be boring. So who wants to go first?
Say this. When I talk about team, I consider the management team and advisory team. So you're, not only are you building out your management team, but you want to fill any gaps with that advisory team. And I've seen companies come and pitch that where it's a professor and a grad student, and that's the team. My first question is, well, wait, where's the financial guy? Where's the marketing guy? You've got to round out this team. Again, whether it's not on the management team, it could be on the advisory team. But you have to be able to build out a full company that understands everything that's going to be needed to take it to market. And it's not just academia people. Ideally, you have people with business experience as well. Okay?
So in terms of the early stages, it's tough to build a team that has all the check boxes you will want in a company. So think of a typical academic startup. It has one or more than one faculty inventor. You have a grad student / postdocs or somebody in that role who have been part of the invention process. Typically, in a lot of cases, it is faculty or the student. One of them is a driver of the spinning out a company. So in terms of what it looks like when the company is trying to build up to a point where it has a meaningful management, is what route you want to take. So if you are planning to go in the direction of SBIR or STTR, team is not the primary focus when it comes to evaluation of those proposals. I've been to many of them. Really, when it comes down to phase ones are really pretty technical, with the message being it's a high-risk proposals, but if NSF is not there, NIH is not there, nobody's there to fund. So what they're looking at, other than the legality of the company and all the things that you need to fill up, is the team able to perform all the tasks that they are mentioning in the proposal. So phase one, so you're now moving from an idea to a company where you at phase one, the team could be still quite technical. You might have a couple of advisors who are telling you how to, manage few things. But once you start moving to phase two, things start becoming a little bit more official in terms of who has what roles in the company. And if the professor is the CEO, then you have to show that this person has significant experience and also has the time, not just the experience, but has the time to really help the process move forward. So once you are at phase two, you are being seen a little differently than a company with two technical people walking in. And that is the phase at which you have to start making a decision that phase two money can help me move the technology forward. Where can I go out and raise money? And that is where this angel kind of funding comes in, and you have to start ramping up the team. So first, external person could be the CEO / somebody who can manage your books, but that is the beginning of a team which is now expanding beyond the core of the academic team.
So I'm gonna jump on something you said. So the faculty be the CEO. When I spend time with me, I talk about being world-class in the roles that you need to be. And faculty are clearly world-class in their research, but I think it's important when you're building a team, and you said it so well, if you're not the best presenter, then don't do the presentation, because you need people in the best roles to give your team the best chance of success, recognizing that the odds are against you, and you're just going to make the odds even worse against you if you don't have the right people in the right roles. If you do things out of, protecting people's feelings, if you're not good at having self-reflection. So building team is the best people in the best roles, and if you don't have somebody world-class, you need to find somebody world-class to fill those roles. And Saurabh's right, early stage, if it's really a research grant, then researchers are okay. But if you're growing a company and you're trying to commercialize and you don't have commercial people on that team, that's a fatal flaw. I would encourage you to stop. If you work with our office, we will tell you to stop, or what we really will do is work with you to find a commercial person that can be world-class in the roles that you need on the commercial side.
If I could add to that, even in private business, developed companies, there's a time and place for every CEO because companies change. And to your point, there's a time where technical person, the founder, is likely to be the CEO. But at some point, probably when they're getting ready to launch or they're out there and they're growing the business, that person may need to step back and become, and it's not really a step back, it's a step sideways, right? They may become the chief technical officer instead of the CEO.
And company doesn't have to have a CEO or a president, right? I mean, and I think it actually shows if, real wisdom for a person to say, I'm not going to be that CEO with a real company here. I'm the chief technology officer today. I'm a technical person. That's what I'm doing. So I think it'd be fine to reserve the CEO role for a CEO to step in. But you're exactly right. It can change.
So the current top voted question actually is a great follow on to this, but I'm going to expand on this question a bit because not only talk about the team at the top of the company, maximizing their chance for success, let's talk about how we divide up the company at that particular stage. How should the founder, and I assume that means the technical founder, balance their equity stake with these sources of funding? Pete, I'm going to ask you to go first, just so we can talk chronologically, but at the SBIR stage, what's in the very founding stage of the company, what's your vision for how the company should be divided?
So every company is going to be different. I think in a qualitative way, it needs to make sense to the investors. Matt talked about it. Investors are going to look at your cap table. That's the pie chart of how your equity is divided. If it doesn't make sense, that's going to be a big blinking red light that this company is not being run well. The investors are going to say, I'm out. There is a significant part and needs to be hard reflection on equity that's assigned to past work, equity that's assigned to sort of the creative spark and vision of the company, and then equity that's going to be assigned to future work. And then you structure as a C Corp, and the preferred financial investors are going to put preferences on all that and crush it all down anyway. So, it needs to be highly rigorous and thoughtful, because if it doesn't, I'm repeating myself, I apologize. It's a negative warning sign.
I'm going to give a very generic answer and say it needs to be balanced because I've seen both sides. You see founders who don't want to give up equity. Of course, you see others who are too giving away too freely. The one thing I will say is 100% of zero is zero. So you can hold on to all the equity you want, but if you don't give up equity, you're not going to grow it back. Right? The one thing I would caution you on is if you give up equity, you need to make sure that your valuation is growing. Right? You have a smaller percentage, but if you've taken on investors or you've taken on partners and given up equity for that, the value of that company should have grown such that your value, even with less percentage equity, is more. And if you can see that growth every time you give up equity, there's nothing wrong with it. It's positive, right? You're putting money in your pocket. That's the same thing an investor would.
I would just add that you need to connect the incentive process within the company with equity. And so if you are even doing non-dilutive funding, that is capital coming inside the company. So there are stages. What is the value inflection point? As Matt is saying, at different stages, you're going from fundraising. Typically at angel round, mostly now deals are convertible notes. You are really valuing the company in Series A, or sometimes you're even pushing all the way out down the line. So you have to start bringing in people after founding and connect them with some critical milestones that will be their contribution. The dangerous thing that I have seen people do is they just add people to the cap table, not knowing what their role will be, And then you get into a lot of challenges just within the team, that why this person is sitting with double-digit equity who never shows up other than in the board meetings. So you have to have pretty clear thinking down the line that founding team, it's okay. We're issuing say 1 million share, we split it based on some logical formula. But then after that, you have to connect it with critical milestones and contribution of each of the team members when they drop out of the board, who comes in the board. Without that, you are pretty much, you could hit a very, very dangerous problem once this venture, any external investors comes in, and you don't want to be in that. So think of a little bit 5 years down the line, how it will look like.
Great points. So we've got a whole bunch of questions coming in, which I love to see, but we've only got about 25 minutes left. So if you haven't done so already, please go through and vote on the questions you want to hear, because we're not going to be able to cover them all in that 25 minutes. So next up, we got a question: what strategies can researchers employ to enhance the competitiveness of their SBIR or STTR grant applications and increase their chances of success? I'll go with you, Pete, because you had spoke about SBIR. What do you think researchers can do to increase their chances of success?
I mentioned using a consultant group. It doesn't have to be that. We will have one available to you. I think you need external people to read your story and make sure it resonates. Even a phase one is still a sales pitch. I mean, you're making. I've not lived on the reviewer side a lot. I don't think anyone who funds a phase one that they don't hope turns into a phase two. And so if you need to be able to tell a story with a vision to some commercialization result. The phase one that we wrote that didn't get funded, that's one of the things we got scored negatively, was that it didn't show enough of the commercialization plan, even though it was a proof of concept. And so I think, and even though your project's going to be reviewed significantly by other scientific people, you're making it's a business sales pitch. Even though you're in one early step that will require many other steps, I think you need to talk about how this will enable those other steps to follow, and that you're going to accomplish some big things now.
I will add, when this iCorps program started, one of the biggest challenges a lot of these agencies had, but these phase ones were pretty much extension of the research grants. People will not get an R1, they will go and submit that as a phase one, and they keep on doing that. So that was a big problem, that these companies were pretty much like an extension of the lab, but they were an LLC and writing grants year after year. So what has changed since then, a program like NSF iCorps, where NSF allows you, actually requires you to add the findings. If you have done an iCorps, you can add your journey of 100 customer discovery process. And what we have seen is there is significant increase in the number of teams who have gone through a process like that, because their commercialization plan is very clear. Their commercialization plan identifies the problem very succinctly. It's not talking about, I will, do X, Y, and Z. And their milestones are very much like deliverable in a contract. So that clarity comes from a process like that. So NSF, NIH, DoD all have different flavor of how these things go. But to improve the quality, it has to be a plan that you can almost take it all the way to the market. But also you need to have connection between how much, 275K, your milestone should not be there, which needs $500,000. So milestone should be clear, potentially quantifiable if you can, and should be well associated with the people, the talent you have, and funding you have. And with good understanding of the competition. That helps you a lot in differentiating yourself. NSF is a 15-page phase one compared to NIH. So NSF has a lot more commercial information that goes into a phase one at NSF compared to a phase one in NIH. DODs are much longer, 20-page phase ones. So again, as you work with the agency, you need a different kind of information flow that has to go in. But you need to understand the landscape. You need to understand very well who you are competing with, what's out there. That makes the quality much better.
So yes, we're going to share the slides. Several people wrote in about that. We're going to share all the entire slide deck from all three panelists today. So don't worry about that. We will get that out. Here's a good one for this group. What role does intellectual property play in securing funding and how can I maximize its effect? Matt, you want to work backwards? Tell us how investors think about IP.
Let me ask you a question. Does the company have a license for that IP?
I would think it's at that point needs to be either in negotiation or they already have, but what would you prefer as an investor?
Investor, I would say, you say it's in negotiation, I would be hesitant. And I don't mean to insult anybody in the innovation group, but getting terms that work for investors sometimes can be difficult. So if you're going to approach an angel group or venture cap, make sure that you have a license for that IP. But in terms of the value, it's huge. It's that block for anyone else, right? Granted, IP can be worked around, and it always is, but it's definitely a good first step, and it adds value to the company.
Well, no harm. I mean, I've told people, my team has heard me say it. If I were a CEO, I would not be adding value to intellectual property without clear right to that. I think you're fool. I mean, that's foolish to do that. And you're making the asset that you're going to negotiate for in the future more valuable. I mean, what do you think that future negotiation is going to look like? So get that nailed down. In a phase 2 SBIR, there's a section that talks about IP. And so you don't have it, that's a fail. I think even in a phase 1, I think that was, again, something we were negatively scored on, that we didn't feature the intellectual property that we had because we didn't think of it as part of the story that you have. I mean, intellectual property is a barrier to competition. You need to be able to talk about how you have some kind of unnatural competitive advantage. Intellectual property is a prime way of achieving that.
So now let's look forward a little bit. What emerging trends or new funding models might be coming down the pipe? And what's changing in your areas that might be of interest to the researchers and founders we have today?
So one thing where I'm saying this change in the overall direction in the national R&D and the public-private partnership. It has been there always. It has been there. It wasn't like, you did not have industry, academia partnering, but now you can see a very deliberate processes out there, or you can say effort by major funding agencies, all the NSF, NIH, DOD, NIST, all of these groups who understand that it is not enough to just find fundamental research, not enough to just keep SBIR, STTR, because that is not sufficient for a lot of these technologies to take it to a point where they can grow. And in some cases, it is driven by that these technologies need to serve the US economy. And it has happened in past where lack of funding has driven a lot of these companies outside US. And so there are a lot of factors. I'll not get into the whole list of things that is driving it, but the biggest change that is happening, that if you follow our panel today, you saw that from very early stages, you can think of truly having a good strategy that you can get funding to take it to something, to a prototype or scale up. If you look at DOE and DOE, all of these agencies, they're helping at the academic stage, though they want IP data and all of these to protect it. But PIs have the right incentive to now plan things out, where like BCDC is an example, you can stay within academic lab and you can take things to a point of scale and testing, which was impossible even 10 years back. So that shift is happening for, again, deep tech related ideas. You can take things much longer, but you have to plan. You have to have a story. It just cannot be, I will solve a problem for publishing it. It has to be, I'm solving a problem for taking it to a point where I will commercialize this. I know my partners. Who are your partners? These are all kind of things, but it is very positive. Today, I feel much more optimistic for 5 years back, a lot of these deep tech ideas moving forward.
I'm going to give a pretty self-serving answer. I'm going to start that with an apology. I don't like to use, but maybe I should. We're hosting this, so maybe why not? So Texas A&M Innovation Exchange. You know, I will share that my experience at Cleveland Clinic was we had the easy button for every part of company formation. When we talked about finding lawyers, we had lawyers to create the Delaware C Corp. We had finance people to manage the finances of the company. We had HR people, all the tax crap, all the kind of stuff that CEO, entrepreneur leads don't want to deal with. We had all. You know, we were the easy button for all. We had secured tens of millions of dollars from the state of Ohio to be some version of our own SBIR kind of thing, to the point where we were putting more than $1 million into some companies as a conduit for state of Ohio money. We are going to do that stuff through our Texas A&M innovation. It's not going to be tomorrow, may not even be next year, but we will do it. Texas A&M's pipeline of research is absolutely worthy. There's incredible amount and incredible strength of the research, incredible quality of researchers. And so I expect that you talk about being investable, as a company investable. I think Texas A&M and our innovation pipeline is absolutely investable. And, you know, places like philanthropy and state of Texas and other places that care about advancing our work will invest in us to do exactly that.
That's huge. Good luck. There are two things that are changing on my side. They are attempting to change the requirements for accredited investors and lowering the requirements because they want to make it available to more people. Unfortunately, the flip side of that is the tax side. Right now, if you invest in a startup and you hold a stock for a minimum of 5 years, I think it's your first $2 million of capital gain is tax-free. That's huge. But unfortunately, our current government is trying to take that away because they want to tax the rich. So that will obviously be a negative hit on investments for startups.
This year, this calendar year?
Hasn't, it's all in talk, both of them.
Quick follow-up to this one, Pete. We had a question come in. If they had an SBIR that scored fairly favorably, would the system office be interested in helping tune it up and get it ready for reallocation?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot to understand about that detail, but sure.
Yes, it's good for now. All right, here's another tough one put in by an anonymous person, a surprise. Negotiating a price for technology licensing deal for intellectual property. How do you balance service cost and technology licensing cost? So to me, that's asking about how do you negotiate and balance the costs of technology licensing versus the startup and costs to service those licenses, intellectual property, execute the patent strategy.
So this is sort of outside the lines of this exact company. You know, when we're doing licenses with our startup companies, I think the right signal, you know, I know it's a good point that Matt made, you know, if you're not investing or if you're, you know, they're not getting right, those are sending all sorts of signals, right? And so I think if Texas A&M were to, I've seen license agreements negotiated with startups that have 6-digit minimum annual payments. That's sending the signal that Texas A&M is not in it for the long term. We want to take cash out of it. I don't know why we would want to send that signal to the market. I mean, yes, we eventually want cash, but I think the signal that we should be sending is that we are well aligned and willing to take risk with our founders to be compensated on the equity. When the company is worth a lot of money, then that's when we should get paid. That doesn't mean that you can have, you know, 0.00000 for everything in the early days. But Texas A&M doesn't have a cash flow problem. Every startup company has a cash flow. The day after you raise your A round, you still have a cash flow. And we do not. So that's, again, I think that is part of our job when we're negotiating deals with startups, is that we are aligning and sending the signal that we are well aligned to share risk with our startup company.
A little outside the scope, but it was a top voted question out here, so it must be on people's minds. All right, we're approaching the end of time. I'd like to give the panelists a chance to give some closing comments. If there's anything you think should have been asked that we didn't get a chance to cover, Saurabh and Matt, I'll have you guys go first, and then Pete can close us out.
I will just say, raising capital is never easy. Building a startup company is tough, having been through quite a few of them as an inventor too. But I would say, being on the optimistic note, there are a lot of resources now where it is getting more and more important to have a solid internal early stage funding process that takes you a little bit ahead of the curve when you are going out for raising the private capital. So when you go out for venture funding, if you have reached certain milestones which previously could not do with an academic setup, there are processes, there are funding which allow you to do that. So my suggestion will be, please reach out to us. If you are interested in programs like NSF iCorps, there are a few of you in the room who have seen the value of that, starting from really 50K iCorps to a PFI of 500,000 and under phase 2. So you're talking almost up to $2 million of funding, which is completely non-dilutive, that you can raise. And you can do significant amount of work in certain areas with that funding. So try to be creative. Building companies stuff, but again, there are resources out there, the people out there who are ready to help. So seek out that help and everybody.
I will second your point on resources. And I think I mentioned this a little bit during the presentation, but McFerrin's right here. A ton of resources here at McFerrin with TNVC. A&M is just, you have resources at your fingertips. Get out there and find it. Before you have to go pitch, come visit AAN. Send Blake a note, an email. Tell him you want to come to an AAN meeting. We welcome you to come to an AAN. That resource is there. Come and see what that's all about, what it's like for these companies to come in and pitch, and how they get grilled or not grilled. Because I got news for you. Some of them don't get any questions, and that's really bad. So the other part of that is, if you don't get funded on your first visit to AAN or any other angel group, don't hesitate to reapply, okay? We have companies that will come year after year. I mean, you apply, you get accepted, so you still have to get accepted. But a lot of times there's interest in the company, but it's just too early, or it's not necessarily a right fit at that point. And we've had companies that get funded on their third try. So don't hesitate to reapply. Give it a year, come back and show that you've delivered on what you said you would deliver. You're this many more steps forward.
Before I turn it over to Pete, our wonderful event staff reminded me that we need to chat about our upcoming events. Those are on the screen. Take note of these. They're also on our website. If you're on our mailing list, you'll get reminders and registration links for each of these. Coming up in February. February 6th is our educational seminar on starting a company. 2024 Patent and Chancellor's Innovation Awards are going to happen April 2024. Then we'll have another educational seminar, case study of a specific company on April 16th. And then, of course, the Texas A&M New Ventures competition. And I'm going to argue that the important dates up there for this group, it's not the May 21st to 22nd. It's February 1st when applications are going to open. If you intend to apply to TNVC next year, you need to contact me or our office now so we can help you get ready. And finally, we're going to have the Innovation Forward, the IF conference in fall of 2024. Stay tuned for that. Pete, you want to close us out?
Sure, thanks. And so, thank you. Thank you for the simple one being here tonight. Thank you for your interest. If you're going to do if you're signed up to be an innovator, that means you have it in your mind that you're gonna be able to change the world, the way the world does something. You know, that's what innovation means, right? The world's doing something one way and you're gonna change it. That's gonna be bumpy. It's not gonna happen from 9 to 5. It's gonna be mornings, it's gonna be evenings, it's gonna be weekends. It's gonna be a baby, it's gonna be a child that is always needy and you're never gonna get away from. So if you're, if that's part of who you are, thank you. That's where we live. And just like being a parent is wonderful. But it can be hard. So please keep those events in your mind. I met a pretty interesting company last week. 2 Aggies. One's the CEO, one's the CTO. They happen to be married, and I think they would make an interesting case study. And because they could talk about that point about how much being the head of a company needs to be part of your life. You know, I think it caused me to think, could I run a company with my wife? The answer is probably not. But if you're able to, I mean, that's what it takes, right? You build a team. I mean, you're gonna go into some battles, and it needs to be like a family. You know, like a good family unit can survive that tension. But anyway,